My name is Hugh Taylor, and I'm the president of Taylor Communications. We're a firm that does content creation, mostly in the technology, business-to-business technology field. So the problem that we solve is that there's a tremendous need today for written communication in marketing and sales in the B2B context. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is that the internet is, at its foundation, a text-based structure. Even though it's visual, words and written material are really the core of it. When you talk about search engines and people going to websites, they're reading material. And so the problem we solve is that a lot of our clients don't have the time to write what they need written. And very often they're actually quite good writers themselves. They just don't have the time, or it's not their thing. So they turn to people like me who can write the content that they need for any number of reasons. So we see demand for basically five different kinds of copy. One is just website copy. There's every web page has words on it, and this is important obviously for communicating the message that you want your website to convey, but it's also important for search engine optimization and indexing and that sort of thing. And then there's a related practice is the writing of blogs. There's a need for websites to constantly add new copy, new content, so they get re-indexed by Google. So there's a subspecialty of what I do, which is blogging for search engines. There's a variant of that is blogging for the brand or for executive communications, to give executives at companies a platform to say what they want to say. A variant of that is byline articles, where we write articles that are published in the name of our clients' executives in other magazines or online sites, but it's for similar reasons. Those are often done for backlinks or for branding, or for what salespeople call air cover. Like here's an article in Forbes by our CEO. Check it out. Very often those articles are written by people like me, and in some cases I've even written entire books for corporate leaders for the same purpose. This is the longest of what you might call long-form content, which is the fourth category of copy. Long-form would include things like white papers, case studies, solution briefs, things that are, a couple of pages long. And then, of course, the fifth kind of copy we have is social media, and these things often go together. Like you'll do like a blog, then have social media copy to go with it for Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn, that kind of stuff. So the copy is all about engagement with critical audiences. These include customers, partners, investors, potential employees, industry analysts. Each of these groups wants to know about a B2B company and their brand. And it's important to remember that all these different groups are going to be looking at the copy, because sometimes there's an emphasis on sales, and of course sales is of paramount importance, but you have to be careful how you frame things so that it doesn't turn off investors or turn off employees or whatever. You're writing from, so if something's going to be public, you have to think who's going to read it. Content creation has a lot to do with bringing potential customers into contact with the company. And this happens in a lot of different ways. So it could be something like writing a blog that gets search engine results and people start clicking, they get to the site, and then they get a pop-up, or they want to know more. It can be social media that's pushing people to the site. And this is where a lot of my work is creating long-form content that's interesting enough that people will register for it. That's the big challenge. Is this piece of content worth giving over my email for, knowing that they're going to get, they're going to get a lot of email? And that's another problem we solve. I've done a lot of writing of these email follow-up nurture scripts, and including things for, like, there's a technology called outreach.io. They do these automated campaigns, or Marketo and these other software. So you want to tee up a series of emails, and again, it's the same challenge. You want those messages to align with the voice and the tone and the brand, and land the same messages. Like, you don't want to have a blog and a white paper that are saying, we're very serious and, we're the gold standard of corporate enterprise IT, and then have a follow-up email that's like, hey, how you doing, dude? It sounds funny, but it's really, when you start to see what people actually write. I've been through a lot of different kinds of processes. I've worked at Microsoft and IBM, so I've done like the big process, that's really extensive. And I've worked at startups, I've done startups. So it's like I've done both, where it's kind of seat of the pants or very process. What I've evolved for my own practice now is a process that's, I hope, meaningful, but not too heavy, like I was saying before, it's really important to have a message document. If the client doesn't have one, we'll create one. And that's just getting at what are their key messages, what is their value proposition, what's their role in the market. And then part of this means thinking competitively. This is something that people don't like to deal with, but they really need to. I always ask this, and people always don't want to. I say, tell me how you lose business. Where are you losing deals? Because that is really where either their message isn't working, or they're susceptible to some competitive messaging that they can't get out of. And it can be a painful experience. People do sales, don't want to talk about their failures, but it's very productive. So the process should involve, at least at the beginning of a client relationship. I don't have this conversation every week, but it's at the beginning. It's like, what are you trying to say? And why would someone buy your product versus someone else's? And what is your competitor saying about you? And this can turn into some interesting conversations. So for example, I was working recently with a major storage vendor, and they said, look, the knock on us is we're too expensive and we're too complicated. Okay. So I said, well, let's deal with that head on. And so there's sort of an art to it. You can't just say, we're cheap and easy. You have to sort of layer it in implicitly into the content. But we brought out those ideas. We found customers that they had who said this was easy to set up, and we saved money over the long term. It was cost effective. So, try to change the conversation from this is expensive to it saves you money, it's a good value. And in this case, it was long form content. I think it's important to have a strategy around this and some kind of mix. And there's been trends around this, like content is getting shorter. That's definitely a trend. I mean, when I first started doing this, I was getting commissioned to write 20-page white papers. Nobody is doing that anymore. White papers are now, whatever, 6-7 pages. Things are quick. I think it depends what you're trying to do. But let's say you're a small B2B company and you want sales pipeline, you need some registration quality copy, even if it's just one thing. And if you're trying to stretch a budget, there's tricks you can do. Like, for example, you could write 5 blog posts and then sort of munge them into a white paper. So you're not repeating, and then you could turn that into a video script, and and then break it down into 100 tweets or whatever. There's different things. You don't have to keep. You can do a lot with a relatively small budget through repurposing or thinking carefully about, what you're trying to do. Another trend that I've seen, and which I'm doing a lot of work for, is is writing blogs really for Google. Like I have one client where I'm doing up to 30 500-word blogs a month, and they're really written for a machine. Like, I mean, I always write them like if a human being actually sees it, it should look interesting, you know, but it's not written for a human reader. It's written to be read by Google to, you know, push the site up in the rankings and have certain key phrases in it. And that's a big trend. But what's interesting, and this is my understanding, is that the Google algorithm is so sophisticated now that it can spot authoritative and non-authoritative writing. I don't know how that works, but this has been good for me in my practice, because people come to people like me and say, we need something of high quality, even though it's for search engine, because a couple of years ago, companies were outsourcing this to like very low cost suppliers who are sort of, you know, stringing stuff together, or even just machine generated content. That's a whole other fascinating and a little bit scary phenomenon that you can, there are software programs that can, if you give them a certain number of keywords, they can sort of spit out something that, I mean, you know, I can tell, most people can tell that it's written by a machine, but if you're just looking, okay, the machine spits it out and then I'll spend 20 minutes on it and it looks pretty good, you know.